Hey everyone, Dave from Ghost DMA. I'm going to be doing a state of DMA 2026. Kind of pretty much go over. I'm going to go over all this right here. Who I am, why you should get a DMA, what is DMA, what anti-cheats are currently hard in 2026 with DMA, how much is it? Isn't it expensive? It's not. Do you need two monitors? You don't. Controller with DMA, is that possible? Can you use a laptop as a main PC? How do cheats work? Do you run the cheat first or second? How does a fuser work? How does the technology work? How do you blend the two PCs together? How does that even work? Why would you need a Pro 4K fuser? Certain monitors you'll need it for. Why do I only sell the 75T and not the 35T? And why not the 100T? Why it's not worth it for the 100T? Why it's completely pointless. It's probably worse to get than a 75T, 35T. Go into why. Is pooled firmware really a thing, or is that a myth? And if it doesn't exist, if that's all kind of a lie, misinformation from the past, when there wasn't too much information about DMA, people just said that, and why that's why that was a thing, and what makes firmware good if that is not a thing. Kind of a spoiler. How do detections work then? Does everyone get banned if they're on the same firmware? And I'll get into kind of why, or like what scenarios that is even a thing. What is the difference between blocking and detecting? Is there anything better than DMA? And spoiler, and why Ghost DMA, and how to contact Ghost DMA. So first off, I'm owner of Ghost DMA. We're partners with, and also, spoiler alert, this is not here yet at the time of the recording, but Sensory is going to be added to the list here. Partner with Blurred, partner with Hex, Easy. Playground was a private Apex, but public here. Playground is the best Apex. Pretty much we have handpicked top of the line DMA cheats. And then also the hardware, we have pretty much everything you need. Top of the line, we have the new MB, which is an 8K. It's a Ferrum killer, has advanced aim curves. And then we have the best firmware, and pretty much everything you need is a one-stop shop, and there's fucking rewards points. Been in the DMA community for a long time, and most of all, I would like to think that I've had a great effect on the DMA community. Had basically made everything a lot more transparent in terms of there's been a lot of misconceptions with DMA. Mainly why you should get a DMA over doing a one PC cheat if you're currently doing one PC cheats, especially like Call of Duty or Arc Raiders. The way effectively DMA works, it avoids any common or any traditional anti-cheat detection. So you're not going to get caught in ban waves traditionally in one PC cheats. There's always a ban wave that there's going to be traces that were left and logged by the anti-cheat that you're going to get banned even post using it after a month. That doesn't exist pretty much with DMA. There's no traditional way of detecting, and it doesn't detect the cheat outright. I'll get more into that, but essentially it's the best way to avoid detections if you care about your account for Call of Duty, Arc Raiders, pretty much everything. It's the best method of cheating is a 2 PC setup. So none of the cheats are running natively on the first PC. And essentially you're gonna bypass, you're gonna be able to keep your accounts and level the playing field to even the playing field with other players, especially with Call of Duty. And is DMA is not, I'll kind of jump into this real quick. DMA is not expensive as you think. Obviously, the kit is less than $300. This includes firmware. This includes everything you need. Less than $300. And if you're in the US, it gets to your door in a few days. If you don't have a second computer, if you don't have like an old laptop in the last 10 years, a mini PC is recommended. Mini PC at the bottom of the website. Only $200. And this used to be closer to 130, so this price might drop. This is kind of inflated. It's DDR4 RAM, which is kind of odd. But after the DDR5 RAM sellout, this kind of jumped up. It must be affecting all electronics with the AI buyout of all the computer components. But this is still really great prices. This is tried and tested. Really good. You're going to be able to run your DMA full speed on this computer here, this mini PC. So barrier of entry is really like, you don't need much. You don't need much. You just need a main computer with a PCI slot. Kind of segue back into what is DMA. DMA stands for Direct Memory Access. It's a computer technical term, direct memory access. Technically, these are FPGAs, field programmable gate array. But a DMA is essentially has direct access to your RAM. So any of these PCI slots, including your GPU, it technically has has DMA, is direct memory access. It's going to be able to talk to your random access memory, your RAM, or your memory where all the game data is stored. It's going to have a direct lane, highway, essentially to the RAM. It doesn't talk to, so the CPU would be right here, the CPU cooler, but under this CPU cooler is the CPU, right? Is the brain of your computer. It completely bypasses, it doesn't talk to the memory at all. It just completely bypasses. So any traditional, like a one PC cheat, the CPU is going to know, everything's going to be logged. So again, it's going to bypass all of that. Anything that's plugged into PCI has a direct access to the memory, so DMA. So that's what DMA is. And essentially, all the game data is getting fed out from your memory into the PCI slot, and then into the DMA card, which needs firmware. Firmware, I guess a good synonymous word would be spoof. Firmware equaling spoof. The spoof of the card will act as a different, like a legitimate device. Looks legit, and that's what the firmware tiers goes up on how complex the emulation gets to support which different anti-cheats, basically, how good the emulation is. And then through a data port, there's two different ports. There's one for flashing, one for data. Through the data port, gets fed to a second computer, which would be the mini PC, laptop, or another tower, whichever you're using. The only prerequisite for the second PC that it needs to run Windows, and it needs to be x64 chip. It can't be an ARM laptop. That's something like people want to ask if the Apple laptops are okay. No, it needs to be Intel based or AMD based. It can't be Snapdragon or anything like that. But essentially, gets fed to the second computer, and that's where the cheat is running. Nothing's running on the main. And then to blend the two displays together, we use HDMI fuser, which there's a Pro fuser and the standard fuser. Effectively higher resolution on the fuser. These are basically like mini GPUs. It has to re-render the screen. And it's the same kind of technology as a green screen. So anything that's black will get erased, opposed to anything that's green that gets, like, so the weatherman, I have a great kind of visual here at the end of this video. Basically the same thing, weatherman, but instead black, and then stick figures replace the weatherman. And then it's placed on top. Instead of the weather map, it's going to be the gameplay, right? So that's how the fuser technology works, and it has to re-render the game in real-time, low latency. I do not recommend doing a capture card that's going to add a ton of latency. I'm talking like 100 milliseconds plus of latency. Some people try to advertise that you can use a capture card instead. No, don't do that. You want to get a fuser. Fuser is necessary. And then also on top of that, to get the Aimbot, you have an Aimbot device. We have Arduino. And then we also have the NB, which is going to be basically the same thing. This is higher end, even more security. But essentially, if you're using a Zim, just do Arduino. Really, Arduino is just plug and play. It's the only device that is plug and play. You don't have to plug a mouse into the device for it to show up in the Zim Matrix Manager. So if you're playing on controller, kind of a spoiler, controller support is completely possible with the help of Zim. You could also use Cronus or Titan 2, but Zim is the most optimal way. It's easiest to use and no latency. Cronus, latency, not as easy to use. Titan, no latency there, but a lot harder to use. So Zim Matrix is the meta for controller. But anyways, this will plug in. One port goes, your COM port, your communication port is going to connect to the second computer, and there's going to be a main and output port, on-the-go port that's going to go into the main computer, and then it's going to be spoofed as a real mouse, and then also pass-through is possible with Arduino, but there's also pass-through built in right out of the box with the MB Pro, so it'll communicate your real mouse descriptors and everything. And then on top of that, this has aim curves, so it's going to blend in the aimbot on the device locally blend it with your mouse movement. So in the future, with AI detection, which some games already have, so Apex Legends, Valorant has algorithmic detection. At the very least, could be AI. We don't really. Some of the like the Mac U dev believes it's AI. I'm kind of more. I think it's just more algorithmic detection, but looking for the difference between your mouse movements and which is basically detecting what is not like what is like computerized aim and banning based off of that. That's going to be the biggest detection vector for this kind of setup, because there's nothing outright. You cannot detect when you have full pass through, or even on the Arduino, that with a real mouse emulation, with this is going to duplicate the fuser is going to duplicate your descriptors of your real monitor automatically, and then also there's nothing bannable directly basically on the hardware. It's very, very difficult. You need a very expensive anti-cheat with a lot of research to be able to ban it. So going into what anti-cheats are hard, basically the only one that is going to be tough, which is why we have this EAC bypass here, is going to be Apex Legends, Fortnite, and Rust. So EAC games with the high tier EAC games. Lower tier EAC games, so like Arc, the finals, anything that's low tier, Dead by Daylight, stuff like that, anything that has EAC that is not Apex, Rust, or Fortnite is going to be a lot tougher with DMA. So if you're getting into DMA, it's still the best way, but it's going to be a lot more expensive than playing any other game with DMA. Just to set your expectations there. And you don't want to do 35T if you're doing EAC. That's something that is very limited. VRAM, the firmware size, you cannot make a very complex emulation with the 35T, right? So pretty much every other game, though, we are still cooking just fine in 2026 with DMA, and including EAC. Faceit, I would not. There's still Faceit firmware that's possible, but it does not last long, and it's basically it's not a great method for traditional DMA. High Note 2 is what I'd recommend for Faceit, which would be for those that don't know, Faceit is an anti-cheat client that you could run CS2. It's not native CS2 though. If you're running straight from the Steam launcher, that's Valve anti-cheat. DMA is going to smoke it, but just only Faceit, which not a lot of people are playing on. Right. So basically DMA is still fucking cooking in 2026. You do not need two monitors, by the way. Two monitors, it's basically the way the fuser works, it's going to combine the main PC and the second PC together under one PC. One output. It's going to blend, and then holding this K4 button's like your input button, tapping K4 will turn the overlay on and off. If you want to switch to only seeing the second computer, you can just hold that K4 button, and then it changes input the same way you change input on a TV, right? Or your monitor. So you only need one monitor. The barrier to entry is not bad at all. Again, controller is possible with DMA. Basically, you'd want to get a Zim matrix. And then which was not bad on price either, but you could also find this on Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp for sometimes half price if you're lucky. Obviously on eBay, Amazon, they're going to be resold. These are usually sold out. And actually, I'm not sure where these are shipped from, but if you're in the United States, I'm pretty sure you have to pay international shipping as well. So sometimes Amazon, you're going to get a lot faster there. But Zim Matrix, again, makes it possible. I have at the very bottom of the Ghost, I have a whole Zim fuser guide, how to get this to work. It's not even long, 6 minutes. And everything's kind of laid out for you. Just all you got to do is copy and paste the config over and follow the instructions. Really, really easy. So you can use controller. A lot of people are, especially Call of Duty controller, and you'll have Aimbot with that native Aimbot. And again, just so you know, you're gonna be matched with controller players. You're with the Zim, it's still gonna look at as like it's gonna be controller. It's not, you're not remapping anything to mouse. That's something that might be a misconception. Okay, and then can you use a laptop as main PC? You can. So there's two different methods. One I don't recommend doing is the M.2 DMA, and also that's gonna be a 35 T DMA. I don't know why this is not sliding over. You don't want to do a 35T DMA, not now, especially with EAC firmware, and just generally it's a bad idea. And then also to do an M.2, it's possible. It's like basically it's gonna be like it's the shape of a hard drive and it'll go in your hard drive slot for like an NVMe drive. It's kind of the same thing. That is possible. That is out there, but it's a lot more expensive and it's gonna be a worse experience. So basically, the best way to go about it is the Thunderbolt adapter with a laptop. If you have USB 4 and Thunderbolt 3 or 4, any computer made in the last 5 years may have it if it's a higher end laptop. So I would check, see if you have Thunderbolt, and then this will plug in. You could hot plug, which is kind of the brilliant thing. If you're getting like PC checked and they're checking to see if you have anything inside your computer, you could also use this on a desktop, and you can hide your DMA. And then you could also hot plug. So if you leave your computer on for too long or coming back from sleep, sometimes your DMA will lose initialization and you'll have to cold boot your main computer, which means turning it off completely, not restarting it, but turning it off and turning it back on. That way the DMA loses power and comes back on. You don't have to do that. You literally restart, just unplug the adapter, unplug the data port, plug power back in, and then you're good to go. You don't have to reboot anything, which is really nice if you're in the middle of a game or something like that. So Thunderbolt is really cool. And most of all, you can give laptop compatibility with the 75T, and 75T is the best way to go with DMA, especially in terms of firmware. And then the speeds between 35T, 75T, and 100T are all going to be exactly the same, with the exception of ZDMA, which the firmware support is even going to be less there, but the speeds are a lot faster. But we're only reading stick figures here. We're only extracting stick figures. You don't really need it to anything else besides the stick figures. The speed is going to be on frame, so there's no point. 75T, way to go. Don't make it complicated, And then how do cheats work? Essentially cheats, pretty much they're going to be read-only cheats rather than writing to memory. So like internal, there's nothing to be left for the anti-cheat to grab. And then you're also, unlike one PC cheats, you're going to be running the cheat after the game is running. So like on an internal cheat, typically you run the cheat before and then run your game. That's not how it works. Here, you pretty much for every cheat besides, for the exception of blurred, you need to run the cheat after the game is open so that it can find the process ID and hook onto the game's memory. And that's kind of something that someone that's first starting to get into DMA, typically people are running their cheats first and they're wondering why none of the wall hacks are showing up. That's because you want to run the cheat after the game is already loaded. So that way it could hook on to the memory to grab the stick figures. Excuse my stuttering. So you don't want to run the cheat first. You typically want to run the cheat after. And I've already kind of explained how the fuser works. If you have, so I'll just show you real quick. Display settings. If you have a monitor that has a really high active signal like this one, 4K at 240 hertz, most likely with a standard fuser, if you have an LG Ultra Gear, you're going to see an active signal, or you have an ultra wide display. You want to check at the 1440p at 144 hertz, 144 hertz, which is like the desired resolution, right? You want to see what the active signal mode is, because this is what the actual signal is being sent. And if you're trying to send a square through a circular hole, it's going to blank the display. So you want to make sure the active signal mode, it's not so much what you set it to here, right? Right here does not matter. You want to go over to advanced display and see what your display active signal mode is. And typically with LG Ultra Gear, they require a very high active signal mode. You will need, if you want a higher fidelity, you might get stuck as low as 1080p, 120 hertz or 60 hertz even sometimes, rare cases, and not be able to do 1440p with the standard fuser. So I would always check if you have a 1440p monitor, you're going to most likely be set. but a lot of people are getting these higher end monitors these days. There's a lot better pricing, so that we're running into a lot of this where they only send out a high active signal mode or a lower 1080p one. So there's nothing middle ground that like the fuser, I guess, could communicate with. So in some cases you will need a 4K fuser, which this DC500 is the best on the market. Don't get the D60, the one with the screen on it. Those have a very high defect rate. They're not good units. Please don't. DC500 is the only 4K fuser you should consider. We used to carry the D60. We used to carry the Bond 7. This is just by far the most reliable unit. Never ran into a monitor that it is never supported. And that's kind of something with the D60. It doesn't have perfect monitor compatibility. So DC500, if you can, spare the extra, do that. And especially if you have a higher end monitor, you want everything to look nice anyways. Okay. And then again, why do we only sell 75T? 35T essentially limited again on how complex emulation can be. 100T, there's no real benefit over besides the pricing is more, the speed, that's not a benefit, right? The pricing, it's a downside, right? But the speed is gonna be exactly the same as 75T and 100T, and 35T as well is almost about the same speed. And then the emulation just as complex as 75T as the 100T. Basically, technically you could do more with the 100T, but as far as what actually like firmware developers support, they are focusing on the 75T. It is the main, like it's the meta, right? Everyone has support for the 75T. So as far as getting an emulation, 75T is the best route to go. Sometimes there's a complex firmware build that is only going to be supported to 75T. They don't want to port it over to a 100T. So 75T is the best way to go. It's just if 100T, you're not going to get any advantage of. Just like straight up, there's no advantage of besides the higher price, which is not an advantage, right? It's like it's more expensive chip for nothing. So don't do the 100T. That's why we do 75T, straight up. Is pooled firmware really a thing? That is something that's something that's in an old very popular YouTube video, which thank God for making the DMA community popular, but pooled firmware, by definition, PCI devices, if you buy 2 different PCI devices from Amazon, you look at the config space, they're going to be exactly the same, even down to the DSN. So pooled firmware is based on a lie. It's technically, well, technical definition, if you have 2 of the same Elgato capture cards, like I have the link pulled up here, 2 of the same HD 60s, right? 2 of the same real capture cards, you're going to have the same exact config space. So by definition, they're pooled. So to segue into this, how do bands work? How do detections work? Basically, like that even if you get banned, if you get manually banned or reported enough, if they're not going to ban every single person that has an HD60, right? The legitimate device, they don't do that. What they will start doing, which is literally, this is from Elgato, the blocks. They will block a real device based on the emulation. So but what does that mean in terms of your account? Nothing. What does that mean in terms of being able to cheat again? You might need new firmware, but it kind of depends on like who the firmware provider is. There is a route of building firmware now that avoids blocks, basically. I don't want to give too much out in terms of giving too much of like private information out to help anti-cheats, right? But basically there's certain devices you can make and certain methods of making the firmware, kind of parent-child device, right? And making it something that's like an assistant device. It's not possible. Basically, no one in the right mind is going to be able to block, just to give that information out. So you can have a little bit of an understanding, right? So essentially, pooled firmware does not exist. What matters is how complex the emulation is. How like it's not just config space. There's a lot more that goes into like TLP response. You have MSI interrupts. The bar controller that you need to be able to like run drivers, and everything needs to be identical to the real device. That's what matters. Slotted, I don't even think you should do slotted firmware. Like there's no real benefit unless it's not like as a complex, like if you make an emulation correct Doesn't matter how many people are on the device. So pulled firmware. But the big thing there is like, you should use public firmware. Probably not, because then you have anti-cheat developers that are able to tell the difference between real and fake. And even if you're playing something that doesn't have great DMA protection, a game that doesn't have great DMA protection, eventually you're kind of opening your door. If you care about your account, I recommend being on decent firmware for those reasons, right? And yes, as for detections, if one person's on the device, it's not going to get everybody banned. The only time that happens is if the firmware itself can be differentiated from the real device, and they can make a detection based off of that. So it does depend on, and that would be at the fault of the firmware provider, and they would have to update your firmware. So there's nothing like user end that, even Vanguard has, a Vanguard employee has stated that that's how detections work. That is misinformation, and that was fed, I believe, to some of the cheat providers that made a YouTube video, and that is common, like a common misconception that was spread that way. But that's not how this shit works. So that's going to set the record straight. Hopefully, you take my word for it. But no, I know what I'm talking about. So yeah, nobody gets banned on the same firmware unless it's the firmware's fault itself, which we don't see too often, right? And how they do combat, especially on EAC, is blocking. So they block the real device. It's not just blocking the emulation; they are blocking the real HD6. And this is just one device. This is one device. There's all kinds of emulations built, right? So it's not just Vanguard. This is kind of an old blog, right? But Easy Anti-Cheat is going to block this. Ace, which is Tencent, is going to block these devices. But they're blocking the real device. In proxy, they're blocking the emulation because there's nothing that they can really do. There's, especially with Elgato, they're based off the same chips. So that makes it really, really hard to detect, right? That is something that they have to do, is block the real device. So that's how EAC specifically, their main way of attacking DMA is blocking a bunch of real devices, stuff that's not inside your PC. So that's what makes it really hard. You're very limited on what devices are possible to be emulated. So yeah, that's the main difference. Again, blocking means they're blocking the real device, which means they're not banning you. Like if you have an emulation that's blocked, all you just need is a new firmware, and then you can continue cheating. Obviously, detection, if they could differentiate the real and the fake, that's what equals detection.
I just wanted to add one note. Future David here. I wanted to add one note. Something with DMA that I wanted to add. They don't usually detect cheats. There's one exception for Ace. They have started detecting cheats. So it's on the cheat provider. For only one anti-cheat, there's technically a way that basically Chinese engineers have figured out. This is not something you're gonna have to worry about with common cheats, but typically you don't have to worry about cheats with DMA. It's not cheats being detected. It is the firmware, the spoof. As I kind of said earlier in this video, the firmware is the spoof basically, and it depends how good the spoof is. Even if you're not running a cheat, if you have your DMA on and the anti-cheat can see the firmware, right? If they could see the firmware, you can get a ban. So if you're not running a cheat, you want to make sure that your firmware is good if you're playing other games. So if you're trying to play other games, you recommend turning your DMA off if it has a kill switch. Ghost DMA kill switch is on the back side of the DMA card, so it's really, really easy to flick off without having to like take your PC apart, you know. So that is really awesome. And then also on top of that, the tier 1 firmware is going to cover pretty much most of the games. But if you're playing EAC, always recommend, and if you're not cheating, especially, always recommend turning that card off, unless you have an up-to-date firmware.
They can differentiate the real and the fake. That's what equals detection. Is there anything better than DMA? Yes, there is. There's HPTT. There's I don't even think it's worth mentioning. Hino 1.2. I don't think it's worth getting. It would make more sense to do DMA with a higher tier firmware. It's basically the same thing, literally the same type of emulations. And Hino 1.2 only supports Intel. HPTT is really good, but even better, Hino 2 is a first man-in-the-middle device. You can basically plug in a real SSD into the device, and it's going to I guess, piggyback off of that real SSD, and you can't block an SSD, right? Especially if it's real, that literally the game is installed on this device, the Hino 2, which obviously is very, for high-end users, like it's very expensive. It's not, it's not for your average consumer, for sure, or for someone that maybe doing tournaments or something that money's on the line, so like, or just enthusiast that has actually, but obviously the price is expensive, but the hardware is worth it. This is the only device I would recommend playing Face It with. But if you're on AMD, you will need a custom, basically motherboard from, I know if you have the motherboard directly, it's only $100 for the modification, which is a BIOS modification, right? That will get you past IOMMU based region locking, which I won't go too much into detail. There's really, but for Ace, Face It, and VGK, they are now doing IOMMU based like region locking, where it's not firmware dependent, basically. For DMA, they're blocking real PCI, like basically in layman's terms, creating a brick wall between the game data and like normal PC use. So it'll, in essence, basically have the same function as blocking, but it's technically not the same thing. And it's an engineering marvel based on these anti-cheats that have done this. But this device is the only device that's able to get around that. If you have Intel, you're good to go. If you're on AMD, you need a modified motherboard, but or the motherboard from them, which is only this MSI Mag 670E Tomahawk, right? So if you're going to extreme end, this is available. The Hino 2 is available, and you get through Ghost DMA. You just make a ticket, and you get support from me, from my support team. And then also Hino 2 directly. And then you also get a really cool role. So that's kind of the advantage of doing Hino 2 through Ghost, right? If you found out about it by me, it'd be nice to, be your guy for that. So why Ghost DMA? Basically, you handpick cheats, all top of the line, only the best cheats. Literally will not resell something that is second best. Everything's the best for per game. You get rewards points. And then you also, if you go down here, Discord, or contact, you join the community. You have, it's not a bullshit community. There's a lot of bad DMA communities that are spamming slurs or being a dickhead, a huge ego, not trying to help you. That's not cultivated here at Ghost DMA. We have, I'll stand on business here. We have the best community. And how to contact again, through discord.gg/ghostdma. Links can be always in every single video description. If I'm not replying to like a YouTube comment or a TikTok comment or whatever, whichever Discord ticket is the best way. DMs, I don't really respond to DMs, and I won't DM you. There's a lot of impersonators, scammers, stuff like that. But yeah, this pretty much covers about everything. Hopefully this helps you make an educated buying decision getting into DMA. And it's really not as crazy or daunting as you may think. Everything, especially now, cheap providers, Blurred is by far the best cheap provider. Everything just kind of just works, plug and play. You don't have to do any like weird finicking. You don't have to go into like command line or into a notepad to change your config. Like everything's very, very intuitive. And even better than one PC cheats, like the Web Radar, you could share your cheats with console users. There's a lot of good stuff. Blurred is going to be launching a new cheat here. I don't want to like it's privileged information, but they are launching a new cheat for a new game, for a game, right? So be on the lookout for that. A lot of people play this game, so yeah, I'll just let you guess. But very exciting stuff coming. There's a new tier 3, excuse me, a new tier 3 firmware for EAC dropping with a lower warranty. A long warranty is really nice, but for lower barrier to entry for EAC. EAC firmware is really tough. Again, they're blocking the way they block devices. Excuse me. The way they block devices, you really want a long warranty. If you're doing a short warranty, you're basically going to be forced to keep buying firmware. But I have a new device that basically it's going to be really hard to get blocked. So we're going to do a lower barrier to entry on the tier 3 if you're planning on playing EAC, but also the EAC bypass is a really good option. Basically, the advantage is 100% uptime versus if you get blocked, you're going to have to wait for your firmware provider to get you a new firmware. And if you're paying for a cheat subscription, you're going to have to watch those days count down on your cheat subscription as you wait for a new firmware, or you're going to have to, you know, try to, yeah. Anyways, it's not a great experience if you're doing that. So higher end firmware is definitely recommended. Ghost, you know, you're gonna get something quality. And then the EAC bypass is honestly my recommended way. It's a lot easier to play EAC games. If you're doing anything, if you're doing Fortnite, Rust, or Blurred, you will need, Fortnite, Rust, or Apex. So if you're doing Blurred or Playground, you can get half price off the EAC bypass. So just make a ticket, ask for that discount code if you have an active subscription bought through Ghost DMA. This will land you half price. So it's really not so bad to play on EAC either. And you just need tier 1 firmware, which comes with the kit, right? Comes with the kit, also comes with a card. We're doing individual. So yeah, Ghost DMA is where it's at to help you out. And if you have any other questions, make a Discord ticket. We're here to help you. And we have all kinds of guides on the YouTube channel for pretty much everything along the way. And going to continue adding more and more. And we have YouTube Shorts and TikTok short form content, trying to make everything as digestible as possible. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you pick Ghost DMA to help you out with your DMA advantage, to even the playing field. If you can't beat them, join them, you know. And yeah, that's pretty much it.